My name is Carla Giza, and I'm 27 years old. For most of my life, I believe loyalty was the glue that held families together. My parents have been married for 30 years. My father still brings my mother her morning coffee, even on days when they argue. And my older sister, Alana, has been with her high school sweetheart for over a decade. To me, that was proof that love didn't have to be flashy. It could be steady, reliable, enduring. So when I met Joseph, I carried that same belief with me. He wasn't the first man I'd dated, but he was the first one I truly pictured a future with. Joseph had that magnetic kind of charm that made people stop mid-conversation just to watch him walk into a room. His smile could disarm even the coldest stranger. And me, I wasn't dazzling. I was the dependable one, the planner, the quiet listener, the person who always paid the bills on time. Maybe that's why I fell for him so quickly. His world felt so alive compared to mine. He thrived on attention, and I convinced myself that if I stayed steady enough, loyal enough, I could balance us out. That my calm would anchor his storms. At first, it almost worked. We laughed, we traveled, we stayed in on Sundays, tangled up in sheets until noon. But even then, there were little warning signs, tiny cracks I didn't want to acknowledge. I'd watch him at restaurants, the way he leaned a little too close to waitresses when he ordered, flashing that grin like a weapon. Or the way he'd post shirtless photos on social media, lapping up comments from women he barely knew. When I brought it up, his eyes would roll so hard, it was as if I had just told the dumbest joke. "Relax, Carla," he'd sigh, brushing me off with a lazy smirk. "I'm not going to marry the first girl I date. You're too intense sometimes." Those words cut sharper than I let him see. I wasn't asking for a ring, not even close. I just wanted respect. But every time he dismissed me, I told myself it was nothing. That it was just Joseph being Joseph, restless, playful, hungry for attention. And still I stayed. Because there were good moments too. Road trips where we blasted music and sang until our voices cracked. Nights when he made me laugh so hard I had to wipe tears from my cheeks. Times when he curled up against me like he couldn't fall asleep unless I was there. Those moments felt like proof. Proof that love was messy, but worth it. Looking back now, I see how much I edited reality for my own comfort. I saw his flaws but painted over them, convinced that if I held on tightly enough, Joseph would eventually see the value in my steadiness, in my loyalty. But here's the truth I couldn't face back then. Joseph didn't see loyalty as love. He saw it as boring. The irony still stings. While I was busy building a foundation, brick by brick, Joseph was busy chasing sparks no matter where they landed. There's this memory that sticks with me. A night when my car broke down on the side of the highway. I called Joseph panicked, and he showed up 20 minutes later with jumper cables and a cocky grin. "Don't worry, babe, I've got you," he said like a hero. For the rest of the night, he made jokes about me being helpless without him. Everyone laughed when he retold the story at a party. I laughed too, even though my cheeks burned with embarrassment. I see it differently now. That night wasn't proof of his love, it was proof of his need to be adored, even at my expense. But I didn't want to see it then. I clung to the belief that all couples had flaws, and mine weren't any different. What I didn't realize was that I wasn't ignoring flaws, I was ignoring patterns. The constant flirting, the subtle digs, the way he craved a spotlight so badly that my presence was only valuable if I played supporting actress. Sometimes I wonder if part of me already knew the ending before it arrived. There were nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to silence that quiet dread. The voice whispering, "What if he never chooses you fully?" I buried that voice. I told myself loyalty mattered, that people eventually realized the worth of someone who stayed through the storms, that he would grow out of the phase where excitement mattered more than stability. But Joseph didn't grow out of it. He grew bolder. And the night it all came crashing down, I realized the thing I feared most, that loyalty, no matter how unwavering, couldn't make someone love you the way you deserved. The night it happened wasn't supposed to be extraordinary. Just another evening, another party, another chance for Joseph to be surrounded by people. But fate has a cruel way of revealing truth when you least expect it. And that night would teach me that silence can sometimes speak louder than love. The night everything collapsed didn't begin like a tragedy. It began with eyeliner smudges and Joseph tapping his watch impatiently. "Come on, Carla," he called from the living room, already dressed in his favorite leather jacket, the one he wore when he wanted attention. "It's just a party. Stop being such a grandma." I sighed as I zipped up my boots. I didn't want to go. Crowds drained me. Drunken laughter and strangers pressing in close always made my chest tight. But Joseph thrived on it, and I wanted God, I still wanted to make him happy. When we arrived, the bar was packed. Music pulsed through the walls, bodies swaying, neon lights, painting strangers' faces in pink and blue. Joseph immediately loosened up, sliding into conversations with ease, buying rounds of shots, making people roar with laughter. I stood beside him, smiling politely, nursing a drink. At first, it was tolerable. I chatted with a few acquaintances, let the noise drown out my unease. But then I noticed her, Vanessa, tall with a mane of glossy black hair and the kind of confidence that turned heads without effort. She wasn't a stranger. I'd seen her in our wider circle before. She had a reputation, bold, unapologetic, dangerous in the way a flame is to dry wood. And Joseph was already drifting toward her. I told myself not to panic, not to assume. But then I saw the way he leaned in, how close their faces were, how Vanessa's hand brushed his arm casually, like she'd done it 100 times. My stomach tightened. I tried to distract myself, forcing a laugh with a friend, but my eyes kept darting back to them. Joseph grinning like a teenager, Vanessa touching his chest lightly as she whispered something in his ear. And then he kissed her. Not a clumsy drunken brush, not an accident, a deliberate lingering kiss. The entire bar blurred for me in that moment. Music thundered, glasses clinked, voices shouted, but all of it faded into static. All I saw was Joseph, my Joseph, tilting his head, pressing his mouth against another woman's, like I was invisible. When they pulled apart, Vanessa's eyes flickered in my direction. She smirked. Joseph followed her gaze and froze when he saw me. But there was no guilt on his face, no panic, just a flicker of annoyance, like I was ruining his fun. He strolled over, casual as ever, sliding his hands into his pockets. "Why are you looking at me like that?" My throat was dry. "You just kissed her." He shrugged, rolling his eyes. "Don't be dramatic, Carla. It was just a kiss." Just a kiss. The words echoed inside me, but before I could respond, he added the dagger. He tilted his head toward Vanessa and smirked. "And besides, she's hotter." The room tilted. The cruelty of it landed harder than the kiss itself. He could have lied. He could have made excuses. But instead he dismissed me like I was nothing more than a jealous nuisance. Something inside me shifted then. A small fragile piece that had been bending for months finally snapped. I stared at him, my face calm even though my insides were trembling. "Then you can have her." His smirk faltered. "Wait, what?" I said. I repeated quietly, evenly, "You can have her." No screaming, no begging, no dramatic scene for him to twist into a story later, just words sharp enough to cut. I set my drink down on the nearest table and reached for my jacket. As I slid it on, I felt his eyes following me, confusion replacing arrogance. For the first time that night, he looked uncertain, but I didn't give him another word. I walked through the crowd, out of the bar, and into the cool night air. The city lights blurred with unshed tears, and my hands shook as I zipped my jacket, but my spine stayed straight. Behind me, the bass still pounded, laughter still rang. Life still continued, as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. That was the night I learned betrayal doesn't always come with warning sirens. Sometimes it comes with a kiss, a smirk, and a shrug that tells you exactly where you stand. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away without looking back. The night I walked out of that bar, I felt like a ghost in my own skin. The city was alive, taxis, honking laughter, spilling out of late-night diners, streetlights buzzing overhead, but all I heard was Joseph's voice echoing in my skull. "Don't be dramatic. It was just a kiss. And besides, she's hotter." It replayed on loop, sharper than glass, cutting into me until I could hardly breathe. I made it home somehow, keys rattling in my trembling hand as I unlocked my apartment. The moment the door closed behind me, I slid down against it, tears blurring everything. For 2 years I had been steady, loyal, devoted, and he had looked me in the eye and compared me to someone else like I was a pair of shoes he'd grown bored of. That night I didn't sleep. My phone lit up with his name again and again, calls, texts, little notifications glowing in the dark. But I didn't touch it. I couldn't. The idea of hearing his voice made me nauseous. Instead, I lay there in silence. And though it felt unbearable, I sensed somewhere deep inside that silence might be the only power I had left. The next morning, I forced myself to go to work. I plastered on a polite smile, nodded at coworkers, typed reports like a machine. No one knew that inside my world had collapsed. At lunch, I sat alone, picking at my salad while my phone buzzed in my bag. More messages, more attempts. I ignored every single one. By the third day, the silence was louder than the betrayal itself. My friends texted asking why I had left the party early. Some hinted that Joseph and Vanessa had looked pretty cozy afterward. I responded with one line, "We're over, no details, no explanations, just that." They pressed, but I stayed firm. I wasn't going to let Joseph's story become gossip fodder for everyone else. At night, though, the weight of it crushed me. I'd curl up in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the kiss, the smirk, the shrug. I wanted to scream to call him and demand answers. But what would that change? He had already given me the answer I wasn't enough for him. So I stayed silent. And strangely, that silence began to shift. The first week, it felt like a punishment, like I was suffocating myself, denying my heart the closure it begged for. But by the second week, it began to feel different. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was space. Space I hadn't realized I needed. For the first time in months, maybe years, my life wasn't orbiting around Joseph's moods, Joseph's wants, Joseph's chaos. I didn't have to rearrange my day to make him happy. I didn't have to worry if he would embarrass me with another joke at my expense. I started filling the space. There was an old violin case shoved in the back of my closet. I hadn't touched it since college when Joseph teased that it was boring compared to his guitar. One night I pulled it out, wiped off the dust, and plucked at the strings. My fingers stumbled awkward at first, but the sound, thin, shaky, imperfect, felt like mine. The following weekend, I signed up for a yoga class at the studio near my apartment. The stretches hurt, my balance wobbled, but when I walked out drenched in sweat, I felt something I hadn't in years: relief. I even called my sister Alana. We hadn't talked deeply in months, mostly because I'd been too wrapped up in Joseph's world. Over coffee, I admitted what had happened. She reached across the table, squeezed my hand, and said words that lodged in my heart. "Silence isn't weakness, Carla. Sometimes it's survival." She was right. Every day that I didn't answer Joseph's calls, I felt a little stronger. Every hour that I let the silence stretch between us, I felt a little freer. Of course, that didn't mean it stopped hurting. I'd still have nights when I curled up with a pillow, sobbing into the fabric until my chest ached. I'd still scroll past old photos, road trips, concerts, lazy Sundays, and feel like my chest was splitting in two. But slowly, the silence started teaching me something. It taught me that I could exist without him. It taught me that my life didn't collapse just because he wasn't in it. And most importantly, it taught me that I didn't need to chase someone who had already chosen to let me go. Looking back now, I think that silence saved me. If I had answered his calls, I might have fallen into his web of apologies and excuses. If I had confronted him, he would have spun the story, painted me as dramatic, and I might have doubted myself again. But silence left no room for his manipulation. Silence kept my dignity intact. I didn't know it then, but that silence would become the very thing that terrified Joseph. Because men like him thrive on noise, arguments, tears, begging. They feed on drama. And when I denied him that, he wasn't done with me. The storm that tore me apart that night at the bar was only the beginning. Because storms, they don't fade quietly. They circle back. And Joseph was already finding his way back into my life. By the time 3 weeks had passed, Joseph and I hadn't spoken once. My silence remained unbroken, but the world around me was anything but quiet. Gossip has a way of finding its way into every corner, no matter how much you try to avoid it. It started small, an offhand comment from a friend who'd seen Joseph and Vanessa at a bar together. "They looked intense," she said, lowering her voice as if whispering would soften the blow, like they couldn't keep their hands off each other. I forced a polite smile, though my stomach tightened. Joseph had moved on without hesitation, and he wanted everyone to see it. Pictures surfaced on social media soon after him and Vanessa at brunch, cocktails in hand. Smiles stretched a little too wide. Each photo looked like a staged performance designed for an audience. And I knew exactly who the audience was supposed to be, me. But I refused to play my part. I didn't comment. I didn't even linger on the posts. I scrolled past them as though they were ads for something I had no interest in buying. Still whispers kept reaching me. Mutual friends with loose lips, strangers with sharp eyes. And slowly the story began to change. At first, Joseph and Vanessa were the shiny new couple everyone wanted to talk about. But then cracks started showing. A friend of mine, Mara, texted me late one night. "Girl Joseph is already embarrassing her. He makes jokes about her in front of people. It's bad." I didn't respond, but I kept reading. Apparently, Joseph had this habit of throwing his arm around Vanessa whenever another man so much as glanced her way. "She's taken, bro," he'd say loud enough for half the room to hear. Sometimes he'd add something crude, something that made people laugh awkwardly, unsure whether to cringe or join in. More stories trickled in. Joseph boasting about how many women still wanted him smirking as Vanessa sat there, cheeks burning. A different friend told me she'd seen Vanessa excuse herself to the bathroom once, eyes glossy with unshed tears, while Joseph carried on entertaining the crowd. And then came the breaking point. It was another night out, another bar filled with music and neon lights. Joseph disappeared halfway through the evening, and Vanessa, suspicious, went looking for him. What she found spread like wildfire by morning. He wasn't just flirting, he wasn't just whispering. He was kissing another woman, openly, shamelessly. Someone caught it on video. Joseph with his hands pressed against the wall, his mouth locked onto a stranger's, while his buddies laughed and egged him on. The clip flew through our social circle in hours. By sunrise, everyone had seen it. I didn't watch it. I didn't need to. The texts were enough. Mara Vanessa stormed out crying. Alana. Did you hear? He did it right in front of her. Unbelievable. Another friend. Remember when he said Vanessa was hotter? Yeah, he humiliated her worse than he ever humiliated you. I should have felt vindicated. Maybe a part of me did. But mostly, I felt hollow. I remembered standing in that bar, weeks earlier, watching him kiss Vanessa, feeling like my heart had been ripped out. And now she knew that pain too. Only worse. Because Joseph didn't just betray her, he laughed about it, basking in the attention, proud of his cruelty. The irony was almost poetic. Vanessa, who once smirked at me like she'd won some prize, now tasted the same poison she'd helped serve. And Joseph, who thought he'd upgraded, revealed himself to be nothing more than a man addicted to tearing down the women who stood beside him. But here's the thing: I didn't gloat. I didn't rush to anyone saying, "See, I told you so." I didn't need to. For the first time, I understood the power of letting karma do the work for you. My silence, once so heavy it threatened to crush me, now felt like armor. While Joseph and Vanessa's chaos played out like a public performance, I stood apart, watching, breathing, healing. Weeks turned into months. The shiny couple stopped posting pictures together. Vanessa unfollowed him. Friends whispered that she avoided social gatherings to dodge the humiliation. Joseph, meanwhile, seemed more restless than ever, louder, angrier, desperate for the attention that was slowly slipping away. And me, I picked up my violin again and played until my fingertips burned. I filled my apartment with music, not arguments. I started sleeping through the night without waking up in tears. For the first time in years, I felt free. But I'd underestimated Joseph. Because men like him, they don't accept silence easily. And just when I thought I'd finally left him behind, he came crashing back into my life. Not with flowers, not with apologies typed neatly in a text, but with desperation, the kind that rattles your door when you least expect it. It started with a message. Late on a Tuesday night, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I turned it over expecting a reminder from my yoga app or a note from my sister. But the name glowing across the screen froze me in place. Joseph. The first time in weeks. The text was simple. Hey, I miss you. Can we talk? My chest tightened. Part of me, some old bruised part, wanted to answer, to demand explanations, to ask why wasn't I enough? But the stronger part of me, the one I had been nurturing in silence, refused. I locked my phone and went back to bed. 2 days later, another message. Longer this time. I know you probably hate me, but I just want to say I'm sorry. Things didn't turn out like I thought they would. I made a mistake. You were always good to me. Please, Carla, just give me a chance to explain. I read it twice, waiting for the part where he admitted what he'd done, where he took responsibility. But it wasn't there. Just vague words, I made a mistake. Like betrayal could be erased with a blanket phrase. I didn't answer. Then came the calls. At first 1 or 2, then 3, 4, 5 in a row. Each time I let the phone ring out until the buzzing stopped. But Joseph wasn't a man who gave up easily. The first time he showed up, I didn't recognize him right away. I had just come back from the grocery store, arms full of bags, when I heard my name echo across the parking lot. Carla. I turned, squinting against the sunlight. There he was, leaning against his car, like he had every right to be there. His hair was messier than usual, his eyes shadowed. His smile practiced but shaky. What are you doing here? I asked, keeping my voice flat. He shoved his hands in his pockets and walked toward me, his grin faltering under my cold gaze. You've been ignoring me. I wanted to see you, to talk. There's nothing to talk about. I shifted my groceries higher on my hip and moved toward my door. But he stepped closer, blocking my path. Come on, don't be like that. I said I was sorry. Jason, Vanessa. It was a mistake. You know me. You know I'm not like that. I laughed a hollow, bitter sound. Not like that Joseph you kissed her in front of me. Then you told me she was hotter. That wasn't a mistake, that was who you are. His jaw clenched. I was drunk. People do stupid things when they drink. You were sober enough to humiliate me, I shot back. For a moment his expression cracked. The charming mask slipped, and I saw the desperation bleeding through. Carla, please. You know me better than anyone. I screwed up, but we had something good. Don't throw it all away. I set my groceries down on the step, looking him dead in the eye. I didn't throw it away. You did, and you did it with a smile on your face. His voice rose sharp and defensive. So what? You think you're perfect. You think you've never made mistakes. You're really going to act like you're better than me now. I didn't flinch. No, I just think I deserve better than you. The words landed between us like a hammer blow. He staggered back half a step, blinking as though I'd struck him. For once, Joseph had no clever retort. His silence lasted only a moment before he tried again, his voice lower, almost pleading. I can change. I'll prove it to you. Just don't give up on me. Give. But I was already done. The silence you're so afraid of, I said softly. That's my answer. I picked up my groceries, brushed past him, and unlocked my door. Behind me, I heard him mutter something under his breath, angry, frustrated, but I didn't turn around. The door shut between us with a heavy click, and in that silence, I felt something settle inside me. Power. The kind I thought I'd lost the night he kissed Vanessa. But Joseph wasn't finished. Over the next week, he called twice a day, left voicemails that swung from apologetic to bitter. One day I miss you. Please, I need you. The next, you're a cold bitch. No wonder I looked for someone else. I ignored every single one. Because the truth was simple, the more he reached out, the more I realized how far I'd come. The Carla, who once cried herself to sleep over his careless words, was gone. And in her place stood a woman who finally understood that silence wasn't weakness, it was strength. But storms never fade quietly, and Joseph's storm was about to break one last time. It was a Thursday night, the kind of evening that should have been forgettable. I had stayed late at work finishing reports, and all I wanted was to go home, microwave leftovers, and sink into bed. But fate has a way of waiting for moments like that, when you're tired, unguarded, to test you one final time. I was crossing the dimly lit parking lot toward my car when I heard it. Carla, wait. My stomach sank even before I turned. Joseph, jogging toward me, hair disheveled, clutching his jacket like he'd run straight out the door the moment he'd decided he couldn't stay away. His face was pale, his eyes frantic. I gripped my keys tighter, resisting the urge to just slide into my car and drive off. But something inside whispered, "This is it. The last confrontation. End it now." He stopped a few feet from me, panting desperation etched across his face. "Please, just hear me out." I stayed still, silent. He took a shaky breath. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I can be better. I've been thinking about us nonstop, and I finally get it. I need you. You are stable, loyal, real. That's what I want. That's what I need." For a second, I almost believed him. His voice cracked. His hands trembled. It would have been so easy to mistake his desperation for sincerity. But then I remembered the smirk on his lips the night he kissed Vanessa, the shrug, the dagger of those words, "She's hotter." I remembered the weeks of silence, the healing I'd carved out with shaking hands. And I realized what he was really asking. Not for love, not for forgiveness, for convenience, for me to pick up his broken pieces and glue them back together. I finally spoke. My voice was calm, steady. "Joseph, I don't think you understand. I don't want to be what you need. I wanted to be with someone who valued me from the start, not someone who figured it out after they burned the bridge." His face twisted, panic flaring. "So that's it? You're just going to throw away everything we had?" I shook my head. "You threw it away the second you made me feel like I wasn't enough. Even now you're not apologizing for what you did. You're just panicking because it didn't work out with her. That's not love, Joseph. That's desperation." "No," he said, shaking his head wildly. "It's not like that. I know I was selfish, but I can change. I'll prove it to you. Just give me one more chance." I looked at him. Really looked at him. For the first time, I didn't see the charming man who swept me off my feet. I saw the truth in empty performance, a man who only valued me when he lost me. And strangely, I felt nothing. No longing, no ache, just clarity. "No," I said, firm but soft. "I don't want another chance. Not with you." His lips parted, eyes wide, as though he couldn't process the words. "I've moved on," I added. "You should too." For a heartbeat, I thought he might cry. But then his expression hardened, twisting into bitterness. "You'll regret this," he spat, his voice sharp. "You'll realize you'll never find someone like me again." I opened my car door and met his eyes one last time. That's the point. The engine roared to life as I shut the door. I didn't wait to see his reaction. I drove off headlights, cutting through the night, leaving him shrinking in the rearview mirror. And for the first time in months, I felt light, free. The closure wasn't in his apology. It wasn't in his begging. It wasn't even in his anger. The closure was in me, in finally realizing that I was worth more than the scraps of love he offered. In refusing to trade loyalty for betrayal. In choosing silence when he wanted chaos, dignity when he wanted drama. As the city blurred past me, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. And I knew one thing for certain: I would never let anyone like Joseph take my worth from me again.